Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? Captain Avery Jackson stood near the back of the tent, sunlight leaking through the seams, cutting faint gold lines across the dull green canvas walls. The air inside was heavy diesel fumes, sweat, coffee gone stale. Around the table the men spoke in low voices, planning, arguing, deciding. None of them looked at her. Not once. She was just the pilot, the one they doubted. On the map laid out before them, creased, dust-stained, marked in red, someone had circled a narrow valley near Kandahar. 150 soldiers pinned here, the lieutenant had said earlier, voice sharp with worry. We've got less than an hour before they're overrun. And yet now, as Avery listened, her name never came up. Her opinion wasn't requested. She might as well have been invisible. The senior officer gestured toward the ridge drawn in black ink. Extraction zone, tight. Winds are unstable, enemy fire from 2 elevations. We'll need experienced pilots. He didn't finish the sentence, but the glance toward Marcus Hale, her co-pilot, said enough. Marcus, always quick with that confident smirk, leaned forward. "I'll handle primary," he said easily. Avery said nothing. Her pulse thrummed. The insult didn't need words. Outside, the desert wind howled against the tent, kicking dust under the flaps. Somewhere, a helicopter engine roared to life, its low thrum vibrating through the ground. She closed her eyes for half a second and let the sound anchor her. The familiar rhythm of rotors had always felt like heartbeat and home at once. But today, it also sounded like judgment. She opened her eyes. "I'll fly," she said quietly. The room went still for a moment. Marcus looked up, eyebrows raised, half amusement, half disbelief. "You," he said, voice low, teasing. "No offense, rookie, but this isn't a simulation run." Her jaw flexed. "It's not about offense," she said calmly. "It's about doing the job." The commanding officer, Colonel Reeves, studied her face. There was no malice in his eyes, just the quiet skepticism of a man who had seen too many eager pilots make fatal mistakes. "You're sure, Jackson?" "Yes, sir." He hesitated, then gave a curt nod. "Fine, your lead, but God help you if you lose that bird." She didn't flinch. "I won't." The briefing broke apart, chairs scraping, soldiers filing out to prep. Marcus muttered something under his breath about luck, but Avery ignored him. She walked into the glare of the Afghan sun, the light so bright it burned through her eyelids. The wind smelled like sand and aviation fuel. The base stretched before her, barracks, hangars, the steady rhythm of helicopters idling on the flight line. Her Black Hawk sat at the far edge, paint dulled by dust, rotors glinting under the heat. A 60, standard, sturdy, reliable. Some called them steel angels. Avery knew better. They were beasts that demanded respect. They didn't forgive mistakes. She ran her gloved hand along the fuselage, the metal already hot under the morning sun. Beneath her palm, she could feel the faint hum of the auxiliary power unit warming up, a heartbeat before flight. "Ready for this?" Marcus asked behind her. His tone wasn't mocking, not fully, just uncertain. Avery didn't turn. "We don't have time to be ready, we have time to act." Inside the cockpit, the air was stifling. Sweat gathered instantly beneath her collar as she ran through pre-flight checks, fuel, hydraulics, rotors, instruments. Everything in order, everything steady. The radio crackled, voices frantic. "We're pinned down, coordinates Delta 6 by 3. Incoming fire from the East Ridge. We need extraction now." Avery adjusted the headset. "Copy Delta 6, Black Hawk inbound." "Copy that, who's flying?" the voice demanded, ragged with fear and static. She paused. "Captain Avery Jackson." A beat, then silence, then faintly a disbelieving laugh. "You're kidding, they sent the rookie." Avery's knuckles tightened around the collective. Marcus shifted beside her, clearing his throat. "I'll take comms," he offered quickly, as if to shield her. But she shook her head. "No, I've got it." She flicked the engine start and the helicopter came alive with a deep, resonant growl. The rotors began to spin, slow at first, then faster, blurring into motion until the air itself trembled. The vibration crawled up through the pedals, through her boots into her chest. The co-pilot's voice cut through the rumble. "Winds are bad today. Visibility's garbage. This'll be hell in that canyon." Avery smiled faintly, just enough to be visible in the reflection of her visor. "Then let's make it home." The Black Hawk lifted, dust spiraling in wild circles beneath them. For a moment the world disappeared into a brown storm of sand. The sun vanished. Everything became vibration, noise, and instinct. Avery's hands were steady on the cyclic, her eyes tracking the gauges even through the chaos. The machine responded like a living thing, fighting, shifting, testing her. Her call sign, Hawkeye, was etched in faded ink on her wrist, half hidden by her flight glove. She caught sight of it as she adjusted the controls, and something old and fierce stirred in her chest. They'd given her that name years ago, back when she wasn't a pilot yet, just a mechanic working late nights under the fluorescent buzz of a hangar, spotting microscopic cracks in rotor assemblies before they failed mid-flight. "You've got eyes like a hawk," one of the older pilots had said, half joking. The name had stuck. Now it was more than a call sign. It was a promise. The radio hissed again, the voice of the pinned commander barely cutting through the interference. "They're closing in. We've got wounded. If that bird doesn't get here in 5. Avery's jaw set. She pushed the collective forward and the Black Hawk surged ahead, engines howling. The desert stretched infinite in every direction, heat shimmering off the dunes like molten glass. Marcus scanned the instruments, eyes flicking nervously. Crosswinds at 30 knots, visibility down to 30 meters. "I see it," Avery said. "Then maybe pull back a little, yeah." She didn't answer. From above, the desert looked dead, endless shades of brown and bone-white rock, but beneath that stillness was war. The ridges ahead were alive with movement, flashes of gunfire cutting through the dust. Smoke curled from the ravine. "There," Marcus said, pointing. "That's our extraction point." Avery leaned forward, squinting through the haze. The soldiers were barely visible, specks of movement clinging to the jagged ridgeline. She could see their muzzle flashes, faint and desperate. "Looks like 50 meters of clearance," she murmured. "Wind shear from the east gonna need manual hover." Marcus frowned. "Manual in that crosswind." She didn't look at him. "You got a better way." Silence. The Black Hawk descended, blades screaming against the gusts. Sand whipped violently across the windshield. Visibility dropped to nearly nothing. Tracer fire streaked through the air, bright red lines that looked too close for comfort. A voice broke through the radio again, hoarse, frantic. "They're right on us. Where the hell are you?" "Coming in," Avery said, voice calm, deliberate. "Hold your ground, we see you." She didn't, not yet, but she would. The cockpit rattled as turbulence slammed against the fuselage. Marcus cursed under his breath, fingers tightening on the console. "We're getting hammered out here." "Stay with me," Avery said softly. "Just hold her steady." Her focus tunneled. The world shrank to the whine of the rotors, the tremor in the cyclic, the flicker of the instruments. Every nerve in her body attuned to the machine. She didn't think. She felt. And beneath that, something else pulsed, a memory quick and unbidden. Her brother, laughing over a grainy video call before her last deployment. "You always were the stubborn one, Av. You'll fly through hell if you have to." She laughed back then. Now the words carried weight. The Black Hawk broke through the dust wall, and suddenly there it was, the canyon. Narrow, unforgiving, alive with chaos. Dozens of soldiers pinned behind rock, muzzle flashes cutting through smoke. "Jesus," Marcus breathed. "They're trapped like fish in a barrel." Avery's eyes narrowed, not for long. Tracer fire flashed past the nose, close enough to make the cockpit glow for an instant. The impact thudded against armor plating, a sharp metallic ping that sent shockwaves up her arms. She adjusted instantly, tilting the helicopter, using the ridgeline for partial cover. "Ramirez, get eyes on that ridge. Suppress left flank," she barked into the comms. The gunner's voice crackled in reply, adrenaline high. "Copy that." The M240 roared from the side door, stitching a line of suppression fire into the enemy ridge. Shell casings rattled across the cabin floor. The sound was deafening, but Avery didn't flinch. She angled the helicopter lower, feeling every vibration as they fought the gusts. Dust rose in choking waves. Her breathing slowed, heart sinking to the rhythm of the rotors. Calm, always calm. Marcus glanced at her, eyes wide. "How the hell are you this steady?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. Every ounce of focus was locked on keeping them alive. The soldiers below began to wave frantically, signaling. Avery's hand tightened on the collective. "Hold tight," she said into the mic. "We're coming for you." A burst of enemy fire raked the ridge, sparks flying where rounds struck stone. Marcus flinched, ducking instinctively, but Avery didn't even blink. She shifted the cyclic a fraction, letting the Black Hawk drift sideways, her movements precise, deliberate, unshakable. The dust swallowed them whole again. Visibility gone, the instruments blurred, only instinct remained. Her co-pilot's voice broke through, tight with panic. "Pull back, we're losing visual." Avery's reply came calm, level. "No, we're right where we need to be." For a heartbeat there was nothing, just the scream of wind, the pulse of engines, the metallic shudder of stress. Then out of the dust she saw them, dark shapes huddled in a shallow depression, waving signal cloths, rifles raised in weary hands. "Got them," she whispered. And in that instant, something inside her steadied. All the doubt, the whispers, the looks gone. There was only the mission, the soldiers waiting below, the storm around her. And the Black Hawk, her partner, her weapon, her lifeline, responding to her every touch. She leaned forward slightly, adjusting her grip. "Hold on," she murmured through the comms, voice soft but resolute. "We're not leaving anyone behind." The helicopter dropped lower into the canyon. Bullets traced fire through the dust. The rotors screamed in protest. And Avery Jackson, Hawkeye, held steady. She could barely see the ground anymore. The dust was so thick it swallowed light, turning the canyon into a blur of brown and shadow. The Black Hawk shuddered violently as another gust slammed against its frame. Marcus cursed under his breath, hands tightening on his harness. "Visibility's gone. We can't hold here." But Avery's voice was calm. "We hold." Through the headset came the cries of soldiers, panicked, fragmented, bleeding through static. "We're hit, we've got wounded. They're pushing from both sides, where's that bird?" Her eyes locked on the dim outline of the ridge. "Right here," she whispered. She nudged the cyclic forward, letting the helicopter drift lower until the rocks below became visible again. Her visor caught flashes of muzzle fire in the haze, bright, erratic, hungry. Each shot was a reminder. One wrong move, and she'd bury everyone in flame and steel. But her hand stayed steady, her breath even. The Black Hawk's engine screamed against the wind, the blades cutting the air like fury itself. The gunner, Ramirez, shouted from the open bay, taking fire from the left ridge. "Copy," Avery answered, adjusting pitch. "Suppress and mark targets." The M240 rattled to life again, the metallic thunder filling the cabin. Brass casings poured from the weapon's feed, bouncing across the deck. Outside, the rhythmic bursts carved through the dust storm, giving the trapped soldiers below a brief chance to move. Marcus was watching her, his face pale, sweat streaking down his temple. "You're pushing too close to the ridge. That wind'll throw us." Avery's reply came soft, almost serene. "Then I'll throw it back." Her fingers moved with impossible precision, adjusting for crosswinds, compensating for downdrafts. reading the tremors through the control stick like a musician feeling the strings of a violin. She could sense the helicopter's limits, the fine edge between control and chaos. And she was dancing right on it. Below, through the shifting haze, she saw flashes of movement, uniforms, helmets, shapes crawling between rocks. The pinned soldiers were trying to regroup. Some were dragging the wounded. Others fired blindly into the smoke. 2 minutes, she said into the mic. We're putting down ropes in 2. 2 minutes might be too late, the ground commander shouted, voice crackling with desperation. Avery's gaze hardened. Then make it enough. The Black Hawk dipped lower. Sand lashed the windshield, the rotors slicing through grit thick enough to sound like rain. Marcus shielded his face, shouting, "We can't hold this hover much longer." "Watch me," Avery said. And she did. The helicopter steadied, hovering perfectly despite the chaos, 30 feet above the canyon floor, its downdraft scattering sand in spirals. Through the noise, she heard her own heartbeat, slow, deliberate, constant. She keyed her mic again. "Ground team, you're green, begin approach." Ropes dropped from the bay door, twisting and swaying in the hot wind. 2 medics descended first, harnessed, their silhouettes swinging like pendulums through the storm. Avery watched them go, every instinct on high alert. She adjusted power to offset the weight shift as they touched down, her hands moving automatically, eyes scanning every gauge. Marcus risked a glance her way. "I don't know how the hell you're doing this," he murmured. Avery didn't answer. She didn't have to. The truth was simple. She'd been here before. Not this exact canyon, not this same war, but close enough. Long ago, before the tattoo, before the respect, she'd hovered over another patch of scorched dirt, another group of desperate voices on a radio, another impossible rescue. And that time she'd almost failed. She pushed the memory away. Not now, not here. The radio hissed again. "We've got 4 wounded, 3 can move, 1 unconscious. Enemies regrouping." "Copy," Avery said. "Move fast and keep low." Through the dust, she could make out the medics dragging bodies toward the ropes. The soldiers' helmets glinted faintly as they lifted the first injured man, securing him to the harness. Then a flash. The ridge erupted with gunfire. Muzzle bursts like sparks in the storm. Tracers streaked past the helicopter, some ricocheting off the armor plating with metallic thuds. Ramirez yelled from the bay, "They've got heavy MGs, 10 o'clock high." Marcus reached for the countermeasure toggle, but Avery stopped him. "No flares, they'll mark our position. I'll handle it." She banked slightly, pulling the Black Hawk sideways to use the canyon wall for cover. The motion was violent enough to jolt Marcus against his harness. The entire cabin tilted, but Avery's hands never faltered. The medics below clung to the ropes, swaying wildly but still clutching their wounded. "A little warning next time," Marcus shouted over the roar. "Didn't have one," she replied, voice flat. Her focus narrowed again. One ridge, one pattern of enemy fire, one window to act. She eased the cyclic forward, nose down, and gave Ramirez the line of sight he needed. "Now!" The gunner unleashed a blistering burst, cutting through the fog and suppressing the left flank. Sparks erupted where the rounds struck rock. The firing from the ridge faltered. "Targets down," Ramirez called. "Copy," Avery said. "Keep eyes right." Another wave of wind slammed into them, but she corrected instantly, countering the drift before Marcus could even shout. The Black Hawk was alive beneath her, angry, straining, but she matched it motion for motion. She whispered under her breath, half to herself, half to the machine, "Come on, girl, hold with me." Somewhere in the static, a soldier's voice cracked. "Ma'am, one of our guys. He's not moving, please hurry." Avery's throat tightened. She exhaled slowly, steadying her breathing. "We're almost there, keep your heads down." She saw movement below, the medics hauling the last wounded man onto the line. The soldier's leg dangled unnaturally, blood streaking the rope. She bit her lip and fought to keep the Black Hawk perfectly still as the extra weight shifted the balance again. Marcus muttered, "We're over limit on lift." "Then the limit moves," Avery said. The Black Hawk groaned, straining under the load. Warnings flickered across the dashboard, heat rising, torque redlining, but she ignored them. She could feel the helicopter telling her what it needed. A slight pitch adjustment, a collective correction, a heartbeat of patience. Then stability. The wounded cleared the canyon floor. The medics began their climb. One by one, the soldiers rose through the dust toward safety. Avery held the hover for what felt like hours but could only have been minutes. Sweat burned her eyes. Her arms ached from tension. Her breath came in controlled bursts. Finally, the last soldier reached the bay. Ramirez hauled him in, shouting, "All secured." Avery exhaled for the first time in minutes. "Copy," retracting ropes. She pulled gently on the collective, guiding the helicopter up through the choking haze. Marcus slumped slightly, shaking his head in disbelief. "You actually did it." She didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed on the canyon below, now just a swirl of dust and fatting muzzle flashes. "No," she said softly, "we did it." But even as she said it, her mind wasn't on the words. It was on the silence in her headset, the kind that followed too much chaos, the kind that usually meant loss. She waited, heart hammering. Then finally, a voice broke through. "All teams accounted for. We're clear. Thank you, Black Hawk." Her shoulders eased, just slightly. The helicopter climbed above the canyon, breaking free of the dust storm into pale sunlight. The world opened up again, wide, endless, cruelly beautiful. Avery blinked against the glare, letting the cold air from the vents wash over her sweat-soaked face. Below, the ground grew smaller. The chaos receded, but the echo of it, those cries, that panic stayed with her. Marcus turned to look at her, his earlier arrogance gone. "I've been flying for 6 years," he said quietly, "and I've never seen anyone handle a storm like that. How the hell did you learn to fly like?" Avery cut him off gently. "You don't learn it, you survive it." He studied her for a moment, then nodded, understanding dawning slow and heavy. Silence settled in the cockpit, broken only by the steady hum of the rotors and the faint groan of metal cooling under strain. Avery flexed her fingers, feeling the ache in her knuckles. The tattoo on her wrist, Hawkeye, peeked from under the glove again, its edges worn from years of flight. She traced it absently with her thumb, lost in thought. Behind her, Ramirez muttered to the crew chief, "She's not a rookie, man. No way." The other man just nodded, eyes wide. "You don't fly like that by luck." They were right, though they didn't know how right. Avery's past wasn't something she talked about, not in briefings, not in bunks, not in the mess hall over bad coffee. The missions she'd flown before this one weren't written down anywhere. Some were classified, others just forgotten. But they had shaped her. Each scar, each sleepless night, each quiet failure no one else had witnessed. They'd all built the woman gripping the controls right now. The radio crackled again. "Enemy reinforcements incoming on the ridge. Recommend immediate egress." Marcus leaned forward. "Command's right, we're low on fuel. We've got everyone we came for. Let's get the hell out." Avery didn't answer at first. Her gaze lingered on the canyon below, on the scars in the earth, on the fatting shapes of men who'd nearly died waiting for them. Then she nodded, "Let's bring them home." The Black Hawk banked north, rising higher into the light. Dust streamed from the rotors like smoke. The soldiers in the back were silent, some slumped, others trembling, all alive. As they cleared the canyon, Marcus exhaled, the tension finally breaking. "For a minute there," he said softly, "I thought we were done." Avery's voice was low, reflective. "So did they." She didn't look back, but she could hear the faint sobs, the whispered prayers, the quiet gratitude filling the cabin. Moments like this weren't about glory. They were about breath, the next one and the one after that. survival made sacred through silence. The sun broke through the haze, catching on her visor. For the first time that day, Avery let herself feel something close to relief. Not pride, just the quiet acknowledgement that, for now, everyone who mattered was still breathing. And as the Black Hawk soared over the battered ridges of Kandahar, she thought of one thing, something her father had said before she deployed. Courage isn't loud, Avery. It's the hand that doesn't shake when everyone's watching. Her hands didn't shake now. Not then, not ever. Why did the radio fall silent right after they cleared the ridge? The sky stretched wide and endless ahead of them, the kind of blue that looked peaceful from afar but felt hollow when you just dragged lives out of fire. The Black Hawk thudded through thin air, its rotors chopping rhythmically, almost soothing now, almost. But inside the cockpit, the quiet wasn't comfort, it was weight. Avery Jackson sat rigid, eyes forward, hands still resting on the controls as if afraid to release them too soon. Her pulse was still fast, though the danger had passed. Her headset hummed with faint static, the absence of screaming voices leaving behind a ghostly echo. Marcus broke the silence first. "You okay?" It was an innocent question, but one layered with something new, hesitation, maybe respect. She didn't answer immediately. He glanced at her, Jackson. Her eyes flicked toward the canyon far behind them, now just a hazy scar on the horizon. "They're all alive," she said quietly. "That's what matters." Marcus exhaled, leaning back in his seat. "Yeah," he murmured, "but damn, I've never seen flying like that. You were reading the wind like you could see it." Avery didn't respond. The compliment didn't land. It wasn't about praise, it was about control. And control was the only thing keeping her upright right now. She reached up and turned the cabin fan toward her face. The air that hit her was dry, metallic, hot. Sweat trickled down her neck, stinging her collarbone. She took a breath, slow and deliberate. Behind her, Ramirez and the flight engineer spoke in hushed tones. Their voices carried disbelief. She didn't even flinch when the rounds hit the hull, Ramirez whispered. "Yeah," the engineer replied, "like she's done it 100 times." Marcus must have heard it too, because he turned, raising an eyebrow. "You ever tell them where you trained?" Avery's lips curved slightly. Not a smile, more like a flicker of memory. "I learned on the ground before I learned in the air." Marcus frowned, not understanding. She continued, voice low. "I used to fix these birds, back when I was a mechanic." That caught his attention. "You, a mechanic?" Avery nodded once. "Years ago, I knew the sound of every bolt before I ever touched a cyclic." He stared at her for a beat, then let out a low whistle. "That explains it." "Explains what?" "How you fly, you don't just pilot it. You feel it like you're part of it." She didn't answer, but the corner of her mouth twitched again, barely perceptible beneath the edge of her visor. He wasn't wrong. To Avery, flying wasn't mechanical. It was intuitive, alive. Every vibration, every pitch, every hum in the metal told a story. The radio crackled suddenly, shattering the calm. "Black Hawk 92, report status. We lost visual after extraction." Marcus keyed the mic. "Command, this is 92. All personnel accounted for. Repeat, all 150 evac complete. Returning to base." The reply came quick, layered with disbelief. "Copy that 92. Wait, confirm 150, as in all." Avery answered this time. "Affirmative, command." Every soldier made it out. A pause, then static, then a voice softer now. "Understood, Hawkeye. Bring them home." Marcus blinked, glancing sideways. "Did they just call you?" "Hawkeye," she finished for him. He hesitated. "That your call sign?" Avery's gaze stayed locked on the horizon. It was, once. There was something in her tone, final, almost haunted, that made him stop asking. The soldiers in the back were quiet too. A few whispered prayers, others just sat staring at their boots, still shaking off the adrenaline. One young medic sat with blood on her hands, none of it her own, and stared out the open bay, tears cutting clean lines down her dust-covered cheeks. Avery caught sight of her in the mirror. The girl looked 19, maybe 20. Too young to have seen what she'd just seen. Too young to know how long that sound, those screams, that rotor thunder, those final gunshots, would replay in her dreams. Avery swallowed hard. She'd been that age once. Sitting in a base hospital, hands shaking, hearing that same sound in her head long after the rotors had gone silent. She adjusted the cyclic slightly, steadying the bird through a mild gust. "Approaching base in 5, Marcus said, checking the nav screen. "Command wants immediate debrief when we land." "Of course they do." Her voice was even, but her mind was already bracing for it. The forward operating base came into view, a cluster of tents, vehicles, and landing pads scattered across the endless tan of desert. As they descended, soldiers looked up, shielding their eyes from the downdraft, pointing toward the incoming Black Hawk. Word had already spread. By the time they touched down, a small crowd had gathered near the pad, mechanics, medics, and a few officers standing in the heat haze. Dust rose in golden clouds as Avery eased the collective down and cut the power. The rotors slowed, whining softly until they stopped altogether. The silence afterward was deafening. Avery unbuckled her harness, exhaling a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. The adrenaline was gone now, leaving behind a strange emptiness, a crash that came after every storm. Marcus climbed out first, pulling off his helmet, shaking his head as if trying to process what had just happened. That was, "I don't even have words." "Don't," Avery said quietly. "Just make sure the logs are clean." She stepped out into the desert heat, the wind instantly drying the sweat on her face. Her boots crunched against the sand-coated metal of the landing pad. All around her, soldiers she didn't know were watching, some whispering, some just staring. Ramirez jogged past, grinning, eyes wide. "Captain, you just pulled off the impossible." She shook her head. It was the team. But that wasn't how they saw it. They saw a helicopter drop into a dust storm and come out carrying every man alive. They saw a pilot steady through chaos, calm through noise, fearless when the sky itself turned against them. And they were right, but not for the reasons they thought. Inside the operations tent, the air conditioning barely worked, but the air felt colder than outside. Commanders huddled around monitors replaying the extraction footage from drone feeds, grainy clips of a Black Hawk hovering in what looked like hell. Colonel Reeves turned when Avery entered. He looked at her, really looked this time, not through the lens of rank or assumption, but through the weight of what he'd just seen. "Sit down, Captain." She did. He tapped the screen. "You held hover in a dust wall at 30 knots, under direct fire with full payload. I've seen pilots crash under less." Avery's tone stayed calm. "We were lucky, sir." "Luck doesn't explain precision," Reeves said. "That was control, the kind I don't see from rookies." Marcus, standing near the back, spoke up quietly. "She's no rookie, sir." Avery shot him a look, but Reeves caught it. His eyes narrowed, reading the unspoken tension. "Then maybe it's time you tell us what you are, Captain." She hesitated. The hum of the tent lights filled the silence. Then quietly she said, "Just someone who's been here before." Reeves studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly, something like respect flickering across his face. "You've got every pilot on this base talking, Jackson. Whatever you did out there, it saved lives. That's not up for debate." "Permission to return to maintenance, sir?" she asked, already halfway out of her seat. "Denied," he said flatly. "You're grounded for debriefing and review. Command wants to know how you pulled it off." Her jaw tightened. "With training, sir." He smiled faintly, and maybe a little instinct. When she left the tent, the sun was already lower, the light softer now, the sky turning gold. The noise of the base buzzed around her, generators, engines, laughter, distant shouts, but she felt strangely apart from it all. Marcus caught up to her near the flight line. "They're calling you Hawkeye again," he said, word spreading. She kept walking. "It's just a name." "No," he said, slowing beside her. "It's a story." Avery stopped, staring out at the horizon. The wind carried fine dust across the landing strip, glinting like fire in the light. "Stories are for after the war," she said quietly. Marcus folded his arms. "Then maybe someone should start writing yours." She turned her head slightly, the faintest smile ghosting across her lips. "Let's survive a few more missions first." He chuckled softly, but behind it was genuine awe, the kind that came from witnessing something he didn't yet fully understand. As Avery walked back toward her helicopter, she paused at the open cockpit door. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass, helmet tucked under her arm, uniform streaked with dust, eyes sharper than they'd been that morning. For a brief second she let herself feel it, not pride exactly, but quiet acknowledgement. The mission had gone right. Lives had been saved. But deep down, she knew this wasn't the last time she'd be tested. Because somewhere out there, in another canyon, another storm, another impossible situation was waiting. And she would fly again. Her hand brushed against the tattoo on her wrist. Hawkeye. A name born from precision, built from scars. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the desert in amber and shadow, one thought settled in her mind like truth whispered from the wind itself. Sometimes strength isn't loud. Sometimes it's the silence that never breaks, even when the world around you does. Why did the crowd fall silent when the second Black Hawk landed? The sun hung low, bleeding orange across the desert, throwing long shadows over the tarmac. Soldiers who had gathered to watch the rescue return now turned their heads toward the distant roar of incoming rotors. The air pulsed with heat and sound. Avery Jackson stood near her helicopter, helmet under her arm, eyes narrowed against the glare. The first extraction bird had just refueled. The rescued soldiers, dust-caked, exhausted, still shaking from the fight, were being led toward the triage tents. Some limped, some were carried, all alive. But it wasn't the wounded that drew everyone's gaze now. It was the man stepping out of the second helicopter, the wing commander. Tall, composed, eyes hidden behind mirrored lenses. He moved with the calm authority of someone who'd spent a lifetime watching life and death balance on the edge of orders. He scanned the pad once, then fixed on Avery. He didn't hesitate. He walked straight toward her. Marcus, standing nearby, straightened instinctively. Ramirez went quiet mid-sentence. Even the mechanics froze. Avery met the commander's gaze as he approached, unflinching. Her pulse, however, betrayed her. She hadn't seen that face in years. "Captain Jackson," the commander said, voice low, precise. "You're a hard one to find." She didn't move. "Didn't know you were looking, sir." He removed his sunglasses. His eyes were sharp but not unkind. "I was, until 5 minutes ago." He held up a tablet, the live drone feed still looping footage of her Black Hawk hovering in the storm. The image flickered, grainy and surreal, her helicopter suspended in chaos. "I've seen a lot of pilots freeze under less," he said. "You didn't." Avery didn't answer. Praise wasn't a language she spoke easily. The commander's gaze dropped briefly to her wrist, where the faint ink of her call sign peeked from under her glove. "Hawkeye." He nodded slowly. "So it's true." Marcus frowned, glancing between them. "What's true?" The commander didn't look at him. "That this base's rookie pilot is the same Hawkeye who pulled 23 soldiers out of coast in 22. A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Ramirez's eyes widened. "That was you." Avery's jaw tightened. "That's classified, sir." The commander's lips curved, faint amusement cutting through the tension. "Not anymore." He turned to the others. "You all think you saw something today. This woman's been doing it for years. She's the one who flew through a blizzard in Nuristan with one engine. the one who landed blind after taking a hit through the cockpit glass. He faced her again and the tone softened. "I thought you were gone." Avery's voice came quiet. "I was supposed to be." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Marcus took a slow step forward. "What does that mean?" Avery looked at him, then away. "It means I did my job, same as today." The commander nodded slightly, understanding the unspoken. "You still downplay it, huh?" She didn't reply. He studied her another moment before speaking again. "You broke rank today," he said. "Took command when the others froze. Disobeyed a stand-down order mid-flight. You know that'll get flagged." Avery's chin lifted. "Yes, sir." "And yet," he continued, "you brought home every soldier alive." A beat of silence. The desert wind shifted, hot and dry, lifting dust around their boots. The commander's voice lowered. "I've been in this war a long time, Jackson. I've seen pilots fly like machines. I've seen heroes burn out trying to be invincible, but I've only met a handful who could balance both. You're one of them." For the first time, something flickered in Avery's eyes, something caught between gratitude and grief. Marcus watched her closely, piecing it together. "You've done this before, all of it, haven't you?" Avery exhaled slowly, her gaze drifting toward the fatting sun. "You don't forget the ones you couldn't save. You just learn how not to lose the next ones." The commander's expression softened. "Still carrying ghosts, I see." "Every pilot does," she said. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was reverent. Soldiers moved quietly around them, lowering stretchers, reloading supplies, keeping busy to hide the weight of what they were witnessing. The commander broke the moment with a nod. "Get cleaned up, Captain. I'll debrief you in an hour." He turned to leave, then paused, glancing back. "And Jackson?" "Yes, sir." He smiled faintly. "Don't disappear again." She didn't answer, she didn't promise. He left the pad, boots crunching through sand, leaving her standing in the wash of sunset, the hum of cooling engines, and the collective silence of those who suddenly understood who she was. Ramirez approached, hesitant. "Captain, you really flew coast." She gave a faint shrug. "Long time ago." Marcus folded his arms. "That's why you never flinched out there." Avery looked down, brushing grit from her gloves. "Fear doesn't stop. You just get better at moving with it." He was quiet for a long time before speaking again. "You could have told me." "And what would you have done?" she asked softly. He hesitated. "Maybe believed you sooner." Her gaze met his steady, not cold. "It's better when they don't. You fly clearer when no one's expecting you to be perfect." Marcus looked at her, searching for the right words, then finally said what everyone else had been thinking. "You saved 150 people today. You know that." Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "No, I brought them home. There's a difference." She turned, walking toward the hangar. Inside, the world felt smaller, quiet hum of lights, smell of oil and metal, the steady tick of cooling rotors. The hangar was her sanctuary. Machines didn't judge. They either worked or they didn't. She climbed the short ladder up to the cockpit again, running her hand along the console, checking for damage. The familiar touch steadied her breathing. Under her seat, a small metal box was wedged tight against the panel. She hesitated before pulling it out. The latch clicked softly as she opened it. Inside lay a metal, silver dulled by dust, its ribbon frayed. Distinguished Flying Cross. She stared at it for a long moment. The edges were worn smooth from years of being handled, but the engraving was still sharp. For Valor and Life-Saving Operations, 2022. She closed the box and slid it back under the seat. Some honors were better left unseen. Her reflection caught in the cockpit glass again, dust streaks across her cheeks, a faint cut above her eyebrow. She barely noticed. Out on the tarmac, voices drifted, laughter, relief, music from a small speaker someone had turned on. The rescued soldiers were alive. Some were calling their families over weak connections, others sitting quietly, heads bowed in disbelief that they survived. Avery watched through the glass. The sight filled her with something deeper than pride, something gentler. Not all wars are fought on the ground. Some are fought inside, the battle between who you were and who you've had to become. And Avery was still fighting hers. Marcus appeared in the doorway below, calling up, "Debrief starts in 5." She nodded, still gazing out. "I'll be there." He hesitated. "You sure you're okay?" She gave the same answer she'd given 100 times before. "I'm fine." He didn't believe it, but he didn't push. When he left, she sat back in the pilot's seat, resting her hands on the controls one last time. Her fingers traced the worn grips, the scratches etched by years of flight. Every mark told a story, every one of them hers. The hangar lights dimmed as night fell, the desert outside cooling to a violet dusk. In that soft darkness, Avery closed her eyes for a moment, not to rest but to remember. The first time she'd been called Hawkeye wasn't after a victory. It was after she failed. A mission years ago: fog, enemy fire, poor visibility. They told her to abort. She hadn't. She saved some, lost others. The name stuck because she never missed again. Since then, every flight had been an act of penance. Every rescue, a way to balance an invisible ledger she'd never quite believed could be cleared. Tonight felt like another entry, one she could live with. Outside, the stars began to pierce the sky, cold, indifferent, constant. Avery looked up at them through the hangar door, her voice barely audible. "Hold fast," she whispered. "Always hold fast." It wasn't a prayer. It was a promise to herself, to those she'd saved, and to those she couldn't. Because courage, she knew, didn't roar. It whispered. It held steady. It acted without asking for applause. And as the base lights flickered to life, illuminating the scarred Black Hawk that had carried 150 souls from hell to home, Avery Jackson, Hawk, sat in the quiet hum of solitude, steady, silent, and unshaken. Why did she hesitate before stepping into the briefing room? The door was half open, fluorescent light spilling through the crack like interrogation. Beyond it, the hum of voices, low and tense. She could already smell the stale coffee, the recycled air, the mix of sweat and command politics. Avery stood outside for just a moment longer, helmet in hand, heartbeat steady but heavy. She'd been through hundreds of debriefs in her life, but this one felt different. Maybe because she wasn't supposed to be back in this life at all. When she finally pushed the door open, the room fell quiet. 3 officers sat around a steel table, a digital map flickering between them. Colonel Reeves, the wing commander she'd known years ago, Callahan, and a man she didn't recognize, wearing plain fatigues but with eyes that said intelligence, not infantry. Reeves gestured. "Captain Jackson, take a seat." She sat, the chair scraped softly against the floor. Callahan leaned forward, elbows on the table. "We'll keep this brief. You disobeyed a direct stand-down order, flew into a restricted engagement zone, violated altitude minimums, and saved every soldier on that ridge." Avery stayed silent. Reeves glanced at the intel officer. "Show her." The man tapped the screen. Drone footage replayed the canyon, the chaos, her helicopter swallowed by dust. Her voice, calm and precise, cutting through radio static. Then the extraction, the lift, the retreat. Callahan watched her face as it played. "You never flinched." "Didn't have time to," she said. "That's not what I meant," he said quietly. The intel officer muted the feed. "Captain, your actions today violated protocol, but command is reconsidering the definition of reckless." Reeves nodded. "The higher-ups want you to brief a simulation team. Your flight data might rewrite dust entry protocol for the entire division." Avery's tone stayed level. "Understood, sir." But Callahan wasn't done. He tapped his pen against the table. "They also want you for something else." She looked up. "Another rescue?" He shook his head. Not this time, something bigger. The intel officer slid a file across the table. Operation Iron Cloud, classified, ongoing in the Eastern Corridor. We lost 2 pilots last week trying to reach a stranded recon team in the mountains. Enemies dug in deep, anti-air all along the valley. Command needs someone who can fly through impossible. Reeves added, they need someone who doesn't freeze when the air turns against them. The room went still. Avery's fingers brushed the edge of the file, but she didn't open it. You're assuming I'll say yes. Callahan studied her. Would you say no? She leaned back, the chair creaking. Sir, with respect, I didn't come back here to be your miracle pilot again. I was assigned for short-term flight instruction. That's all. Reeves' brow furrowed. You're saying you'll walk away after this? I'm saying I've done my part. For the first time, something cracked in Callahan's composed tone. You think you've done your part? Jackson, you saved 150 soldiers today. You think that ends here? Avery's voice was calm, almost too calm. Every time I go up, someone doesn't come down. That doesn't balance out, sir. It just keeps counting. The intel officer shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Callahan. Reeves broke the silence. Captain, no one's forcing you, but you're not the kind who sits on the sidelines. Avery met his gaze. Maybe it's time I tried. Callahan exhaled through his nose, slow, restrained. You've earned the right to rest, I'll give you that. But I'll also say this, you're the only one who can fly this mission. And you know it. He stood, sliding the file closer to her. You don't have to open it now, but read it before you decide. Avery didn't touch it. When the meeting adjourned, she was the last to leave. The others filed out, their boots echoing on the metal floor. Callahan lingered near the door. As she passed, he said softly, You were my best pilot once. Still are. Whatever you're running from, it's already forgiven. She stopped just short of the door, eyes forward. Forgiven doesn't mean forgotten, sir. He nodded quietly. No, but it helps you fly straighter. She left without looking back. Outside, the desert had turned silver under moonlight. The air was cool now, the base quieter, the chaos of the day settling into the heavy stillness of night. Floodlights cast long beams across the landing pads, and the rhythmic hum of generators pulsed in the background like a heartbeat. Avery walked without destination, past the med tents, past the rows of refueled aircraft, past the murmured laughter of soldiers who were still alive because she'd refused to stop. Her boots crunched softly on gravel. At the edge of the flight line, she stopped and stared out at the dark horizon. The mountains loomed in the distance, jagged, endless, the same mountains that had swallowed so many before. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the cockpit glass of her Black Hawk. She could almost hear the faint echo of the day's chaos, the cries, the gunfire, the storm. Marcus appeared behind her, voice quiet. You didn't go to the barracks. Couldn't sleep if I tried, she said. He stepped up beside her. Heard about the new mission. Everyone's talking. Of course they are. They say you're thinking about turning it down. She glanced at him. And what do you think, Lieutenant? He hesitated. I think you've earned the right to say no, but I also think the people who'd be on that next mission, they don't stand a chance without you. Her jaw tensed. That's the problem, they shouldn't need me. Marcus folded his arms, watching her. You ever think maybe it's not about need? Maybe it's about trust? Avery didn't answer. He continued, voice softer. They trust you because you fly when everyone else pulls back. You move forward when fear says stop. You make it look easy, but it's not. We all see that. She turned toward him, eyes sharp. You think that's strength? He paused, isn't it? Her voice dropped, barely audible. No, it's survival. For a long time, neither spoke. The wind shifted, carrying the faint hum of distant rotors. Somewhere, another unit was taking off, another pilot doing their part, the endless cycle of duty and return. Avery looked back toward the horizon. "Do you know why I left before?" she asked. Marcus shook his head. She exhaled slowly. "We were flying evac in Nuristan, whiteout conditions, no nav. We had civilians on board. The other bird went down, my wingman. We searched for hours, nothing but ice and silence. When command grounded me afterward, they called it exhaustion. I called it enough." Marcus' voice was quiet. "But you came back." "Because someone asked," she said, "and I didn't know how to say no." He nodded slowly. "So what's different now?" She looked at him for a long moment before answering. "Now I do." A radio cracked somewhere in the distance, breaking the stillness. The night carried on, oblivious. Marcus watched her for a moment, then spoke carefully. "If you walk away, I'll cover you. Say you're injured, grounded, whatever it takes." She smiled faintly, not mocking, just soft. "You're a good man, Marcus." "I try." She turned back to the helicopter, resting her hand on its side. "But I don't think I can walk away." He frowned. "Why not?" "Because they'll send someone else," she said quietly. "And if they die, I'll still be flying with them, just not here." Marcus said nothing. He didn't have to. Avery stepped closer to the cockpit, fingertips brushing the glass. Her reflection looked tired, older than her age. But behind the fatigue was that same steady fire, the one that had kept her alive through every storm. She opened the cockpit door and climbed in, settling into the pilot's seat. The controls were dark, inert, waiting. Her fingers found the cyclic, the collective. She didn't power it on. She just sat there. The memory came uninvited, the sound of her wingman's last transmission years ago. "Don't wait for me. Just get them out." And she had, but she'd never forgiven herself for listening. Her eyes stung. She blinked it away, letting the silence settle. Outside, the desert stretched endless, a sea of shadow and moonlight. Somewhere out there in another valley, another team was waiting. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the unopened mission file. The flap was still sealed, her name printed across the top in black ink. She hesitated, then tore it open. Inside, a satellite image, a mountain range carved by rivers and craters. Coordinates. Notes about anti-air radar. The words "no previous extraction successful" circled twice. She stared at the map for a long time. Then she closed the folder, setting it on her lap. Her voice was barely a whisper. "One last flight." The words weren't a vow. They were an inevitability. Because some people are born to chase quiet skis. And some are born to carry others through the storm. And Avery Jackson Hawkeye had never once flown for glory. She flew for the ones who still needed a way home. Why did the world always go quiet before a storm? It was 400 hours. The desert sky was still black, stars fatting behind thin layers of cloud. The base slept restlessly, the kind of uneasy stillness that only came when something big was about to happen. Avery stood by her Black Hawk flight suit half-zipped, hair tied tight, eyes on the horizon. The faint hum of distant engines pulsed through the air. She didn't move. She was listening not to the world around her but to the one inside. The one that whispered, "You could still walk away." But she didn't. Behind her, the hangar lights flickered on. Marcus appeared, carrying his helmet, eyes bleary but determined. "You're really going through with it," he said quietly. She didn't turn. "You didn't have to show up." "Yeah, well," he said, adjusting his vest. "Someone has to make sure you don't fly straight into a mountain." A faint smile ghosted her lips. "You volunteered." He shrugged. "Command wanted a co-pilot. I made sure it was me." "Why?" "Because if I'm going to risk my life," he said, "I'd rather do it with the one pilot who makes impossible look boring." She finally turned to face him. "This isn't going to be like last time." "I know," he said, meeting her eyes. "That's why I'm here." The sound of boots echoed behind them. Ramirez and the flight engineer approached, both geared up, helmets in hand. Ramirez looked more nervous than usual. "Captain," he said, "tell me you at least looked at the forecast." "Storm cells all over the corridor," she replied. "Winds at 40, visibility down to nothing, perfect flying weather." Ramirez groaned. "You joke like that, ma'am, and I start praying in 3 languages." The engineer grinned faintly. "Make it 4. Avery's voice softened. "You all don't have to do this." Marcus answered before anyone else could. "Neither do you, but you're here." She didn't argue. There was no point. Command briefed them in silence, coordinates, timings, contingencies that would never survive first contact. Operation Iron Cloud, retrieval of a stranded recon team pinned on a ridge deep in hostile territory. 2 previous birds down, 1 destroyed midair, the rest too afraid to fly in the corridor again. The commander's tone was steady but heavy. "You'll have minimal support once you enter the valley. Communications will cut at 20 clicks. After that, you're on your own. Understand?" "Yes, sir," Avery said. Callahan studied her across the table. "You sure about this, Jackson?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes, sir." He nodded slowly. "Then bring them home." Again. As the briefing ended, Marcus leaned close and murmured, "You ever get tired of being their miracle?" Avery's gaze didn't shift. "It's not about miracles, it's about math. Get in, get out, keep breathing." He almost smiled, cold comfort. "Realistic," she said. Outside, dawn began to break, faint, gray, uncertain. The crew prepped the helicopter in silence, movements efficient, mechanical. Every hand knew its place, every sound carried purpose. Avery walked a slow circle around the Black Hawk, checking every panel, every bolt, every hydraulic line. Her fingertips brushed metal as if greeting an old friend. Marcus watched her quietly. "You still do your own pre-flight?" "Always," she said. "Machines talk, you just have to listen close enough." He nodded, half smiling. "And what's she saying?" Avery ran her palm along the rotor mast, then looked at him. "She'll hold." They loaded supplies, weapons, and medical kits. The air smelled of fuel and dust. The engine's low hum grew to a growl. As they climbed aboard, Ramirez gave a nervous laugh. "Captain, no offense, but last time we flew into a storm, I swore I saw lightning inside the cockpit." Avery slipped on her helmet. "Then maybe this time keep your eyes closed." The Black Hawk roared to life. Blades blurred, sand spiraled, the ground fell away beneath them. The radio crackled with static. "Black Hawk 92, you are cleared for departure. Godspeed." Marcus's voice came through the intercom. "We're really doing this." Avery's tone was steady. "No turning back now." They climbed to 3,000 feet, following the ridgeline east. The desert stretched below, endless and empty, shadows long in the morning light. The hum of the rotors filled the cabin. For a while, no one spoke. The kind of silence that wasn't uncomfortable, just the sound of people saving words for when they'd matter most. 30 minutes in, Marcus broke it. "You ever think about quitting?" Avery's eyes stayed forward, every flight. "And yet here you are." "Because someone has to be." He watched her profile in the dim light, the calm precision, the stillness that came only from someone who'd made peace with chaos. But under it, he saw something else. Fatigue, fear she wouldn't name. "You ever wonder," he said softly, "what happens if the sky stops listening?" She didn't look at him. "Then we make it listen again." Ahead, the clouds thickened, dark, dense, alive. The first gust hit them like a shove. The Black Hawk shuddered, stabilizers whining. "Here we go," Ramirez muttered. Avery's grip tightened on the cyclic. "Hold formation." Wind buffeted the bird hard from the right. Instruments flickered, horizon tilting. She corrected instantly, body moving with instinctive precision. Marcus steadied his breathing, visibility dropping to 50 meters. "Switch to instruments." Lightning flashed somewhere in the cloud mass ahead, silent, distant. A wall of gray swallowed the horizon. The storm was coming. Minutes passed. Rain began to lash the windshield, blurring the world into streaks of silver. The valley below vanished into shadow. "Altitude holding," Marcus said, "but turbulence is getting violent." Avery's jaw set. "Ride it." The helicopter pitched, rolled, corrected, the storm tossing it like a toy, the engines groaning under strain. But Avery didn't fight the wind. She moved with it, adjusting microseconds ahead of each gust. Marcus watched in awe, even as sweat rolled down his neck. "You make it look easy." She didn't answer. Because it was. Every instinct screamed to pull up, to break off, to turn back, but she didn't. Not this time. Not after Coast. Not after Nuristan. Not again. "Command, this is 9-2, Marcus said into the mic. "Entering Iron Cloud Corridor. Visibility minimal. We're proceeding." Static, no reply. The valley walls began to rise around them, steep, dark silhouettes cutting into the clouds. Wind funneled between them, turning vicious. "Crosswind shifting," Avery said. "Hold the yaw." "Copy." Below, through brief breaks in the storm, flashes of movement, tracer rounds. "Taking fire," Ramirez shouted. "Flare packs ready," Marcus called. "Negative," Avery said sharply. "We use them, they'll know our exact position. Keep low, fast and erratic." She banked left, hugging the ridge line. The rotors howled inches from rock. "Altitude 250, Marcus yelled. "Hold it." Bullets streaked past, red in the mist. One pinged off the tail. Another struck the armor plating near the side door. Ramirez returned fire with controlled bursts, the sound blending with thunder. The helicopter jolted, warning lights flickered. "Tail rotor hit," Marcus called. "Minor," Avery said, scanning gauges. "We're good." He looked at her, incredulous. "Minor." "Compared to crashing, yes." The storm roared louder. Lightning forked across the ridge, close enough to burn her vision white. For a heartbeat, everything was noise, thunder, gunfire, static, engine strain. Then out of nowhere, a voice crackled through. "This is Recon Team Delta. Anyone copy? We're pinned under the North Ridge." Marcus's eyes went wide. "We got them." Avery leaned in. "Delta, this is Hawkeye 9-2. Mark your position with infrared strobe." Static then, no strobe left, smoke only. "Copy, hold position, we're coming." She dropped the collective, diving through the storm. The wind screamed past the fuselage, the altimeter spinning fast. "Altitude 150, Marcus warned. Avery's voice stayed even. "Trust me." She caught sight of faint red smoke through the rain, barely visible, curling upward like a ghost. "There," Ramirez shouted. Avery lined up the descent. "We get one shot at this. Prepare for extraction under fire." Marcus swallowed. "You sure we can land?" Her tone carried quiet conviction. "We're not landing, we're hovering." The Black Hawk flared, blades slicing the air inches from the ridge. The ground below erupted with gunfire, sparks flying as rounds ricocheted off rock. The crew worked like one organism, Ramirez suppressing, the engineer securing cables, Marcus calling readings. Avery's eyes flicked between the instruments and the ground, every muscle in her arms burning from the strain of holding balance. "Delta, move," she shouted into the radio. "You're green, go." Through the smoke, shadowed figures emerged, 4 soldiers dragging another, sprinting toward the drop zone. "Come on," Avery whispered. Gunfire intensified. She didn't flinch. She adjusted trim, keeping the bird rock solid as the team reached the ropes. "One's on," Marcus called. 2, 3. A loud crack, the hull shook violently. "Engine 2 hit," Ramirez shouted. Avery's breath caught not fear, just calculation. She adjusted power, routing load to the remaining turbine. "We're not done yet." "Four's up," Marcus yelled. "They're all on." Avery pulled collective, the helicopter groaning as it lifted through the storm. The ridge fell away beneath them. Lightning illuminated the valley, turning chaos into blinding white for a split second, and in that instant, Avery saw her reflection in the windshield. Calm, unyielding. Marcus exhaled, voice trembling. We got them, we got them. But Avery didn't celebrate. She only said softly, not yet, not until we're clear. The storm swallowed them again. Behind her, the rescued soldiers clung to life, drenched, bloodied, alive. Ramirez shouted updates. Marcus adjusted systems. And Avery Jackson, Hawkeye, flew on, her hands steady, her voice calm, her silence louder than any prayer. Because this wasn't just another rescue. It was redemption written in rain and fire. And for the first time in years, she wasn't running from the storm. She was flying straight through it. Why did the storm grow stronger just when they were almost clear? It was as if the sky itself refused to let her go. The wind howled louder, tearing across the valley in furious gusts. The rain came sideways, a torrent that blurred everything into a living wall of gray. The Black Hawk groaned under the weight of it all, the fuselage trembling like something alive and afraid. Marcus shouted over the roar, engine temps spiking. If we don't climb soon, we're going to lose both turbines. Avery's voice came even, deliberate. We can't climb yet, crosswinds will flip us. Ramirez shouted from the bay, one of the ropes snapped, the load swinging. She adjusted pitch immediately, compensating for the imbalance. The helicopter swayed, the rescued soldiers dangling beneath, screaming through the comm line as the cable whipped in the wind. Hold steady, Marcus yelled, his own voice breaking from strain. Avery's eyes never left the altimeter. The numbers bounced wildly, useless now. Her world was narrowed down to feel the tremors in the cyclic, the rhythm of the rotors, the way the storm pressed against her like a living thing trying to force her down. She spoke through clenched teeth. Ramirez, lock the harness line. Marcus, reroute power to primary turbine. Already on it. The engine whined louder, torque edging into red. The cockpit filled with flashing warning lights, temperature, altitude, stability. A lesser pilot would have panicked. Avery didn't. She had seen worse. She had been worse. The rain blurred everything beyond the windshield. Only the faint glow of lightning lit the world for split seconds at a time. Each flash revealed the same thing, a wall of rock too close for comfort. Marcus shouted again, we're losing altitude. I know, she said, quiet but firm. He turned toward her, eyes wide, then pull up. I said I know. There was something in her tone, that cold focus that felt almost detached, like she wasn't afraid to die, only afraid to fail. The helicopter dipped dangerously low. Below, the ridge line loomed jagged teeth waiting to tear them apart. Avery exhaled slowly, centering herself. She remembered her father's voice, years ago in a garage back home, when she'd first learned to balance a model rotor. You don't fight the wind, Avery, you dance with it. So she did. She eased pressure left, rolled the cyclic a hair's breadth forward, then pulled the collective just enough to tilt the nose into the gust. The wind hit hard, but instead of fighting it, she used it. The Black Hawk lifted, slicing through the updraft like a blade through smoke. Marcus watched the altimeter climb and whispered, no way. But Avery didn't look relieved. Her breath was ragged now, her arms trembling from the force of every correction. Sweat streaked down her neck. Her voice, though, stayed steady. Status on the line. Ramirez's voice came back strained. They're stable. We've got M all locked in. Good, she said. We're taking them home. She started to climb. The engine screamed in protest. The sky outside turned a sickening green-gray, the kind that meant turbulence and hail. The storm had evolved into something alive, something angry. Lightning forked again, so close it left an afterimage across her visor. Marcus cursed. Static spiking, instruments are going dark. Go manual. He blinked, manual in this. Avery gave the faintest nod. You wanted to learn how I fly. This is it. And then everything went dark. The power flickered once, twice, and then the main display cut out completely. Only the emergency lights remained, bathing the cockpit in dim red glow. Marcus stared at the dead instruments, heart pounding. We've lost avionics, no navigation, no artificial horizon. Eyes up, Avery said. What? Stop looking at the dead screens. Look at me. He did. Her eyes were locked forward, focused on nothing and everything. The storm outside was chaos, but she was still, completely still. You feel that, she said. The vibration on your seat, the way it shifts. Yeah. That's crosswind. Compensate left rudder now. He obeyed, the nose straightened slightly. Good, listen to the blades. The pitch is off by 2%. Trim right a touch. He adjusted again. The vibration eased. Her voice stayed soft, rhythmic, almost hypnotic amid the storm. Don't fight the wind, just listen to it. Marcus found himself breathing slower. The panic dulled. The noise didn't vanish, but it no longer ruled him. In the middle of chaos, Avery Jackson was teaching him how to fly. Lightning struck again, lighting the world in blinding white. For a split second, she saw her own reflection, eyes hollowed, jaw tight, the face of someone who'd spent too long trying to atone for ghosts. Marcus followed her gaze, realizing what she was really fighting wasn't the weather. It was memory. Captain, he said quietly, you're shaking. She didn't answer. Then from the rear, Ramirez's voice panicked. Captain, we've got a leak in the right fuel line. Pressure's dropping. Marcus swore. If we lose more, we're not making it back to base. Avery's hands gripped the controls tighter. Then we make it far enough. He looked at her. Far enough for what? For them to live. The simplicity of it hit him harder than any thunderclap. She didn't care about herself. Not anymore. This wasn't about survival, it was about penance. The radio crackled weakly, half dead through interference. Hawkeye, do you copy? Status storm off the charts. Marcus tried to respond, but Avery cut him off. Ignore it, focus on lift. She pulled the Black Hawk up through the densest part of the cloud, the rotors screaming under the load. The world outside was all white, no sky, no ground, no direction. Her breathing quickened, every muscle screamed. The cyclic fought her, the tail kicked, alarms wailed in protest, but she held it. And then, just for an instant, she saw it. A break in the clouds. A sliver of sunlight slicing through the gray. It was there and gone in a second, but it was enough. She adjusted course toward it, the helicopter clawing upward, shaking like it might come apart. Marcus shouted readings, meaningless numbers, but she was flying blind now, by instinct alone. A bolt of lightning cracked so close the cabin filled with static, the headset screaming. The smell of ozone filled the air. Then came the sound no pilot ever wants to hear, a deep, gut-wrenching bang. The right engine seized. Marcus' voice cracked. Engine 1 offline, we're on single power. Divert fuel, Avery ordered, voice hoarse. It won't hold. It has to. The Black Hawk started to drop, altitude falling fast, warning tones blared, the storm howled in victory. For a moment, just one, Avery thought she saw Nuristan again. The blizzard, the falling bird, the silence that followed. Not again. Not this time. She pushed the cyclic forward, coaxing lift from the dying engine. The rotors strained, screaming. The frame shook violently, rivets rattling loose. Marcus shouted, we're out of power. Avery's voice dropped to a whisper. Then we glide. The helicopter tilted nose up, slowing the descent just enough to keep it controlled. Through the thinning clouds, they finally broke into clearer air, sunlight stabbing through like salvation. Below them stretched open desert, endless, golden, merciful. Marcus blinked, tears from his eyes. We're out of the storm. Avery didn't answer. Her arms were trembling now. Her breathing ragged. The adrenaline that had fueled her was gone, replaced by exhaustion that ran bone-deep. Ramirez's voice came from the back, softer this time. "Captain, we're clear." She let out a long, shaking breath. "Copy." They were alive, barely. But as she looked at the gauges, her heart sank. Fuel zeroing, altitude unstable. They weren't going to make it back to base. Not with one engine. Not with that much weight. She keyed her mic. "Command, this is Hawkeye 9-2. We've got all survivors aboard, but we've lost one engine. Fuel low, preparing emergency landing." Static, then a faint voice. "Copy, Hawkeye. We're tracking your beacon. You're—" The rest cut out. Marcus looked at her. "There's no flat terrain for 20 clicks." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "We'll find it." She stared at the horizon, at the faint shimmer of heat and light where the storm broke into desert. "Hold tight," she said, almost to herself. The Black Hawk descended slowly, cutting through calm air now, a strange peace after chaos. The storm faded behind them like a closing door. Avery's hand stayed firm on the controls, but inside, something was unraveling, not fear, but fatigue, guilt, relief, all colliding in silence. Marcus finally said it, quiet, reverent. "You did it." She shook her head faintly. "Not yet." Her gaze drifted to the rearview mirror, to the rescued soldiers slumped together alive. Then to Marcus, pale but steady. And then to her own reflection, eyes hollow but still burning. This was what she'd come back for. Not redemption, not glory, just this, the proof that she could still bring someone home. The radio clicked again, faint and broken. "Hawkeye, do you read? Base visual, prepare to land." Avery smiled weakly. "Home stretch." But deep down, she knew storms like this never really end. They just wait. And as the desert rose to meet them, she whispered under her breath, "Almost there." Why did the quiet after battle always feel louder than the war itself? The storm had fallen behind them. The sky was clear again, a sharp, endless blue stretching over the open desert. But the silence in the cockpit felt unnatural, too still, too fragile, like one wrong breath could shatter it. The Black Hawk limped through the air, a wounded bird running on fumes. One engine dead, the other sputtering. Warning lights blinked across the console, low fuel, rotor imbalance, system failure imminent. Marcus scanned the gauges, his voice tight. "We're running on less than 3 minutes of flight time." Avery nodded. "I know. Nearest flat zone's 5 clicks out." "Too far," she said. "We'll take the plateau ahead." He frowned, checking the terrain radar. "That's rocky as hell." "Better than burning in the sky." Ramirez's voice came from the back, hoarse but hopeful. "Captain, you get us on the ground. I swear I'll never complain about turbulence again." Avery managed the faintest smile. "Hold on to that thought." She eased the collective down, feeling the vibration shift beneath her seat. The helicopter's frame creaked in protest, the metal screaming for rest. The surviving engine coughed once, then steadied with a guttural hum. The desert rose slowly beneath them, jagged terrain, scattered rock, the plateau she'd spotted half a kilometer ahead. Marcus double-checked the instruments. "Winds cross from the south, 25 knots. Landing's gonna be rough." Avery's eyes narrowed. "Rough's fine, dead's not." She adjusted trim, feeling the machine's weight like it was part of her own body. Every motion was deliberate, every input measured by instinct and experience. No manuals, no numbers, just feel. The world slowed. The wind roared past the fuselage, whipping sand against the glass. The rotors blurred overhead. Sweat trickled down her temple, dripping from her chin. Her knuckles were white on the controls. Marcus was breathing fast beside her, but she didn't hear it anymore. She was somewhere else, back in Nuristan, back in the storm she'd never escaped, hearing the echo of a voice she'd lost long ago. "You can't save everyone, Avery." And she'd whispered back then, "Watch me." Now, years later, she whispered again, but softer this time. Just this one. The plateau loomed closer. She flared the nose, slowing descent. The tail rotor kicked once, threatening to spin her broadside. She countered instantly, keeping it level. The single engine wheezed in defiance. Marcus braced himself, eyes wide. "We're coming in too hot." "Better fast than short," she said. The Black Hawk hit the ground hard. The skids bounced, metal shrieking. Dust exploded upward, swallowing the helicopter in a golden cloud. Then silence. For 3 long seconds, no one moved. The rotors slowed, whining like a sigh. The engine coughed twice, then died. The bird rested crookedly on the plateau, battered, smoking, but whole. They were down. Alive. Marcus let out a strangled laugh, half disbelief, half release. "You actually did it." Ramirez shouted from the back, voice breaking. "We're down, we're alive." The rescued soldiers cheered weakly, clapping shoulders, crying, some laughing through exhaustion. The sound filled the cabin, rough, uneven, human. Avery didn't join them. She just sat there, staring out through the cracked windshield, her chest rising and falling slow, steady. Marcus looked at her, voice soft now. "You okay?" She exhaled. "Define okay." He smiled faintly. "Alive, that's enough." For a long moment she said nothing. Then finally, "Yeah, that's enough." The radio crackled. "Hawkeye 9-2, this is base. We've got your beacon. Rescue convoy en route, ETA 15 minutes. Marcus grabbed the mic. "Copy base, all personnel secure, birds down but intact." A pause, then "Copy that. Hell of a job, Hawkeye." He turned to her. "You hear that? They're calling you Hawkeye again." Her gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. The storm clouds were far away now, distant, fading like memory. "It's just a name," she murmured. "Not to them," Marcus said. "To them it's hope." She closed her eyes briefly. Hope doesn't need a name. Outside, the desert wind carried the faint scent of rain, rare, clean, fleeting. The kind of air that reminded you that not all storms destroy. Some wash you clean. 15 minutes later, the rescue convoy arrived, armored vehicles rolling up through the dust, medics jumping out, voices urgent but joyful. The wounded were pulled out first, checked, stabilized. Ramirez hopped down next, helping lift gear, grinning like a man reborn. "Captain," he called back, "you coming?" Avery didn't answer right away. She just sat there in the cockpit, helmet in her lap, watching through the cracked glass as her crew, her people, climbed out alive. Marcus leaned closer. "They're waiting for you." She nodded faintly, voice low. "I know." He hesitated, then said softly, "You ever gonna let yourself breathe, Jackson?" She finally turned to him. Her eyes were tired but softer now. "Maybe when the wind stops." He smiled. "Then I guess you'll be holding your breath forever." "Maybe," she said, and for the first time that day, maybe that year, she smiled. When she stepped out, the sun hit her face, warm and blinding. Soldiers turned toward her, clapping, shouting, calling her name. She nodded once, acknowledging them not as a hero, not as a legend, just as a pilot who'd done what had to be done. Callahan was there too, arriving in a command truck, dust trailing behind. He stepped out, eyes scanning the wrecked helicopter before finding her. "Hell of a landing," he said. "Didn't have much choice," she replied. He smiled faintly, always making it sound simple. "Never was," she said. He studied her face for a long moment, then said quietly, "You did it again, Hawkeye. You brought them home." Her gaze drifted toward the horizon, where the last of the storm clouds dissolved into sunlight. "Yeah," she said softly, "this time." He nodded. "Command's already asking for your report. They'll want every detail." She looked back at the helicopter, its skin scorched, panels bent, rotors still. "Let them read the dust," she said. "It tells enough." Callahan gave a small nod, the kind of respect that didn't need words, and walked away. Avery turned to Marcus, who stood beside her, silent. His uniform was torn, his face streaked with grime, but his eyes were bright, alive. He said quietly, "You think we'll ever fly again?" She took a long breath, staring at the rising sun. "Maybe, but if we don't, we still did what mattered." He frowned slightly. "Which is?" "Getting them home." The simplicity of it carried more weight than any medal, any headline. The convoy started to move. The crew climbed aboard the trucks. Marcus followed last, pausing at the open door. "You coming?" "In a minute," she said. He nodded and left her standing there beside the broken bird, her reflection shimmering faintly in its scorched glass. She reached out, laying a hand on the metal, feeling its heat, its scars. This machine had been her armor, her weapon, her confession booth, and now it was quiet, resting like it deserved. Her whisper was almost lost to the wind. "Good girl, you did it." The desert answered with silence. She stood there until the sun rose high, until the sounds of engines faded, until all that was left was the hum of wind across rock. Only then did she allow herself to breathe. For the first time in years, it wasn't sharp or shallow. It was full, clean, real. The ghosts that had followed her from every mission, every loss, every moment she thought she wasn't enough, they were still there. They always would be, but their voices were softer now. Because today, she had done what she came back to do. No one would ever truly understand what it cost her. Not the commanders, not the crews, not even Marcus. But maybe that was the point. Because dignity doesn't shout. It doesn't demand to be seen. It simply acts. And somewhere between the storm and the sunlight, between chaos and calm, Avery Jackson, Hawkeye, finally understood something she'd spent a lifetime trying to learn. You can't save everyone, but you can save someone. And sometimes that's enough. She turned toward the horizon one last time. The sky was clean, endless. And with a faint smile she whispered, almost to the wind itself, "Hold fast." Then she walked away from the wreckage, boots crunching in the dust, leaving behind the storm that had once defined her. Not as a ghost, not as a legend, just as a soldier who finally found peace.